our meeting, but I want to tell everyone welcome to Rotary. So we'll get our projection going here. So today is February 3rd, 2021, and our guest speaker today is Father Joseph A. Brown, a professor of Africana Studies at SIU Carbondale. Already hit the bell, but welcome to Rotary. It's our 100th year this year, so we will be getting a new centennial bell this year, which is fun. Thank you to me. I'll be a little self-serving, I guess, for greeting everyone today. As always, our doodle poll information is in the chat and will be sent out. It's our virtual clipboard. So I know when we're in person, we've been scheduling out those duties each week. We've been able to do that for 2, 3, 4 weeks out at least. And with the doodle poll, we're working on a weekly basis. So if you are joining us next week, please consider signing up through that doodle poll for one of our duties. So at this time, I'd like to ask Faith Miller, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
All righty. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Faith. Now it's time for our moment of reflection, and this week our moment of reflection is offered by Linda Flowers.
Okay, I thought since this was the beginning of Black History Month and we are contributing to the upgrade of Turley Park that we would reflect today on the person whom the park was named after, Reverend Linus Turley. Reverend Turley was a man interested in all facets of life. He always liked to build, loved the positive approach to problems, glorified and encouraging people, and was always an inspiration. He was one of those rare persons who exemplified honesty, integrity, energy, determination, and true greatness. Although he attended grade school and high school in Brookport, he later received a Doctor of Divinity degree from the Union Baptist Bible College and Seminary in Houston, Texas. He was pastor of Rock Hill Baptist Church in Carbondale when he died in 1969, and his funeral services were broadcast live on Carbondale Radio. Reverend Turley was the secretary of the Mount Olive District, and from 1954, he was the moderator of the district. From 1950, he was the first vice president of the Illinois National Baptist Missionary and Education Convention and a member of the Foreign Mission Board of the National Baptist Convention of America. He was president of the Carbondale Ministerial Alliance in 1959 and 1960. Reverend Turley was active in the following civic and community organizations: first president of the Carbondale Human Relations Commission and member of the Carbondale Citizens Advisory Commission. He was the first Black chaplain of the Illinois State Senate, member of the State Family and Child Welfare Bureau, and district chairman of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Reverend Turley received many awards in his lifetime, including the National Champion of Open Occupancy Award. He received an award from the city of Carbondale for his service in 1969 and a certificate of achievement from the Chicago Baptist Institute. Reverend Turley was a coordinator in the Civil Rights March in Washington, D.C. in 1963, and he was a participant in the March from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama in 1965. Reverend Turley was a warrior and a drum major for right and justice.
Thank you, Linda. I have not lived in Carbondale that long. I did not know anything about Mr. Turley. So thank you for sharing that information. And I think it's great for us to reflect on that history. Now it is Rotary song time. So it is the first meeting of February. So we're going to go ahead and sing Happy Birthday. So who do we have as February birthdays? Do we have any February birthdays in the club? Don't be shy. Anyone? We can't be a February birthday free club, can we? Well, I'm sure somebody's got friends or other relatives who are February birthdays. So we will sing happy birthday in their honor today.
My brother Rick's birthday, Skip's birthday rather, happens to be today. So I suppose since no one stepped forward, we can sing it to him.
There we go. Happy birthday, Skip. So, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Happy
Happy
birthday
birthday to you.
Always great to hear the Rotary Choir in song this morning. So, chat here. Now it's time for introduction of our guests. I'd like to welcome fellow Rotarian Sharon Lawrenskis. Could you please introduce our guest today?
Yes, well, as far as I could tell, our only guest is Father Joseph Brown, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Father Brown. I know you all know that he's professor of Africana Studies at SIU. You may not know that he's originally from East St. Louis. He has a bachelor's from St. Louis University in philosophy, a master's in creative writing from Johns Hopkins, a master's and doctorate in African American Studies and American Studies, respectively, from Yale. He's a published poet, a member of the Society of Jesus. And those of us in the Catholic community in Southern Illinois, I think, know him as the finest homilist in Southern Illinois. So thank you, Father Brown, for being here today.
And I believe we also have a couple other guests. Faith, you had some guests with us today?
Yes, it looks like they're on. I have a couple of students who not necessarily required to be here, but one of their instructors had suggested, there they are, had suggested that they take part in some type of community meeting. And Jennifer, who has spoken with the Rotary or to Rotary before, steered them my way. So I was more than happy to invite them to Rotary. So we've got Kim and Nicole. So you guys want to introduce yourselves and tell them what year and school you're in.
Hi, I'm Nicole.
I'm Kim.
We're both juniors in the dental hygiene program.
She emailed me and said that lab was running late, so I'll have to get on the Schuster about that. Welcome, guys.
Well, welcome to everyone. Thank you so much. Some club announcements. Our Club Foundation Donation Challenge in our 100th year here, we are contributing $100 to the foundation. We've got some members who have signed up all the way through June. So I want to thank Carl and Linda Flowers for making that contribution, the matching contribution for our other club donations in February of 2021. So thank you very much. And if anybody else is interested, we are open after June to continue that on. Club duties helping out. Our doodle poll link is right here. I will put it in the chat again. I know Shane had it in the chat earlier. Whoops. You can always email Shane as well, but our duties are open for next week. This is our digital clipboard. So if you're able to join us next week, please consider being our greeter, leading us in the pledge, offering a reflection, introducing guests, or doing the four-way test for us. Our 100 Little Things update. Right now we have 61 projects completed. So I want to thank Faith and Shane for finishing numbers 60 and 61 in the last week or so. We have 100 donating pairs of shoes that Shane took care of there, and Faith Miller with Operation Warm Toes with some sock donations. So I want to thank everybody for that. Currently underway, we've got gun lock donations. I have a box of them that have already been collected, and Sharon is coordinating that. Spring cleanup, we're going to do an adopt a spot cleanup here. We're working on flashlights and box fans that we're collecting for additional contributions to local organizations. So, I mean, at this point, we're about halfway through our Rotary year, and we're over halfway done with our project. So I want to thank everybody for all the hard work, from Salvation Army to donating coats to glasses collection and toys. It's been a great year. So great job, everyone, on that. On the progress. Active service projects. Today's menu at the warming center is unknown. I have not heard an update yet from Patty on what that menu was for today, but we are supporting Heartland Catering and the warming center each week through our contributions for food. Even though we're not meeting in person, many of us are still paying for our meals each week, which helps that local business and the Carbondale Warming Center. So I want to thank everybody for that. The Warming Center Material Support Project. Gail is not with us today. He sent me a message that there weren't any updates that he was aware of, and he was not able to join us today due to another obligation. Jerry, do you have any updates from the Warming Center on materials that they need right now?
No, nothing specific on what they need March and into April.
Okay, thank you very much. Some district news. Our Rotary Satellite Club of Carbondale, located in Murfreesboro, is official. So that was one of our 100 projects we wanted to do, was launch a satellite club. That club is now meeting. So I think it's fantastic that we've been able to expand Rotary, and those Rotary members did get included in our annual growth. So they are members of our club for right now, until we can get them launched with a full club. I want to thank Brooke and Kelsey and Shane for all their hard work in getting that off the ground. Our district grant project, we do need another idea for our grant project. I know Jerry had some ideas, and we're working on that at the board level right now to get something finalized. But the all-inclusive playground at Turley Park was our project for 2020-2021. So we'll be wrapping that up here shortly. Rotary International news, coming year 2021, starting in July of 2021, protecting the environment is now an official cause of Rotary. So things to keep in mind for next year's project and going forward, that it has now been added as one of our official causes. We're going to continue to highlight polio. The countdown to history is on, that we are getting ever so close to eradicating polio worldwide. December 2021, only 138 children were paralyzed by polio. So Afghanistan and Pakistan are really the highlights of where we're focusing at this point. But we'll continue to support the Polio Plus Fund and eradicating polio worldwide. Now it is time for some of your good news. Who's got some good news to share? I can't see everybody on my screen, so feel free to go ahead and speak up whenever you've got some good news to share.
This is Christine, and on Monday, my latest great niece was born. I don't know any of the vital statistics except her name is Quinn, Quinn, and she's quite pretty.
Carl Flowers here. I've got some good news I was fortunate enough to receive my vaccination for the COVID vaccine on yesterday, and I think I saw Linda there as well. I think we were sitting right across from one another after we had our vaccination, but because we had our mask on, we couldn't actually. I wasn't sure that was her, but I think it was. So, and my wife also had hers yesterday. Still living, no pain or anything. So it's a good thing.
Yes, it is a blessing. And I thought that was you, Carl, but I wasn't positive. Those masks cover 3/4 of your face. And I thought, well, is it Carl? So yes, I too am thankful that I got my vaccine yesterday.
Same here, Gil Crony. I got my vaccination last Thursday at the local grocery store pharmacy.
Any other good news for today?
Hi, Rick, this is Jim Murray, and I just wanted to let everybody know that I was given the honor of making the Forbes Top 100 or Top 1,000 Women Advisors this year too.
Congratulations on that, Ginger. Thank you.
I'll throw one in here. Some of our students are going to be participating as, I guess, navigators during some of the vaccine clinics. So hopefully they'll be able to be identified by their scrubs that say dental hygiene. So tell them you know their director if you happen to be taking part on one of those clinics during the month. Some of them will be there when I'm there for my appointment on the 16th. So that's interesting. They're not giving the vaccines. They're just helping, just FYI.
Last call for good news. Hearing none, we'll move on. Thank you all for the smiles today. So we don't have Will with us online, and Gail is out today. Jerry Malumbi, I will nominate you today to be the stand-in for Sergeant at Arms.
Well, I'll have to fall back on what Gail said, is that Rotarians are doing such good work all of the time. We'll give you a free pass today, but watch out for next week.
Thank you, Jerry. So now it's time for our guest speaker, and Father Joseph Brown sent me a long biography, and Sharon Lorinskas, I think, surmised it pretty well. So without further ado, I will stop my screen share so that we can all see him in our speaker view. And Father Brown.
I told someone that I was going to be working with the Rotary Club today, and that since this was my free will offering, they were going to get what they paid for. So I just wanted to warn you all to that, but I really appreciated somebody saying that I was a good hobblist. I mean, that just took me out, because I've been told other things here in Southern Illinois on occasions. Now, given the brief amount of time that we have, I will not do much more than just this little bitty half-page of notes. But I'm going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. After I read one small sentence from Martin Luther King's "Where Do We Go From Here?" In that famous speech of his, "Where do we go from here?" he says, "The tendency to ignore the Negro's contribution to American life and strip him of his personhood is as old as the earliest history books and as contemporary as the morning's newspaper. Yeah. The question has been so often, why do we have to study Black history? And how come we only get the shortest month of the year? And how come and why? And my usual response is, are you that dumb on purpose? Or are you trying to be that dumb? There is something that I call the dominant narrative. Who gets to tell the story with authority? Whose version of the story gets taught in our schools, in our media, in our institutions and organizations? I ask my students this all the time, and in today's Daily Egyptian, one of my former students is quoting some of the things I present in class as the paradigms, those statements that you better memorize and use to organize yourself. And one of them is, who defines the terms by which we live? So when we're going to ask the question about why Black History Month, well, first of all, I don't think I want to cross Carter G. Woodson. Carter G. Woodson, 3 years out of PhD studies at Harvard University, decides in 1915 to start the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. And he made that Negro History Week, which I participated in all through grade school and high school. But I was having this conversation with some students just the other day. Well, how come we only get February? No, children. Carter G. Woodson, with his PhD in history from Harvard, along with his colleagues, picked February because it had the birthdays of Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. And that week, February, with February 12th and 14th in it, that was Negro History Month. And the problem of people saying, how come we get February, the shortest month, tells me that the dominant narrative is at work. We only get what other people give us. We never understand that the history of Black people in America is a history of what they gave to America and to the world, which is why I wanted to just mention from Martin Luther King to the Pledge of Allegiance. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, I spend the first week of every semester teaching the Constitution. We the people did not include a whole bunch of people in this chat. No women, no Black people, no Native Americans. We the people, in order to, and then we proceed to see the influence of slave-holding white male Protestants and one Catholic, white male Protestants, influence how that Constitution was written, from the 3/5 of a person to the United States Senate's organization, to the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, because the militia that they were talking about in those days, that militia was in response to over 50 slave rebellions and uprising before the Constitution was being written. They were afraid for their lives, and they knew that they had to have the right to bear arms quickly in case there was an uprising or rebellion from the native populations coming back to take their land. That's what we know. One nation, indivisible. We're just 1 month away from a whole group of people who put that under scrutiny, who made that a problem. Well, with liberty and justice for all, we just celebrated the anniversary of the women's suffrage movement. Abigail Adams told her husband, "Don't forget the women, John." Well, they did. But why are we studying Black history? Because I think that if we look at it not as, oh God, do we have to rehearse all that ugliness and all that pain and all that oppression? I never owned slaves, so why do I have to study that? Because America is going through today what Black America went through 2 centuries ago. How do we as a country, as a culture, as a nation that wants to be indivisible, how do we prepare ourselves to persist through trauma and transcend it? Every great figure that I have ever studied, the real story is about. They are proof to me. You can't talk about child abuse without talking about slavery. The theme for this year is the Black family. Well, America's economic system was based on breaking up the nuclear Black family. You couldn't have a family. Frederick Douglass says, I don't know who, I know who my mother was, but I only saw her 4 or 5 times in my life, and I've never found out who my daddy was. The absent Black father in the family is a great stereotype of negativity. But what about the present white father in the slave family, who was a good example of brutality, abuse, and economic domination? We have to look at what's going on in this country and see that whatever Frederick Douglass was able to do in order to break the bonds of slavery in his brain, because he said, learning how to read and write will bring me on the path to freedom. So when we talk about in the state of Illinois, the teacher shortage, we look at SIU's College of Education shrinking down so much that I don't know how we're going to prepare all the teachers we need, which means that our students, all of our children, are going to be less and less prepared to live in a complicated world. One of my students yesterday in class told me that she got sick and tired of her social studies teacher in high school talking about what a great person Andrew Jackson was and why they should never put Harriet Tubman's face on a $20 bill. And I said, well, did you learn something about him after that class? She said, no. So I proceeded to tell her, brutalizing slave owner, brutalizing domestic partner, architect of the great displacement of the native nations and the Trail of Tears. Yes, that's who he is. Oh, but he established the National Bank. But the banking system in this country during the lifetime of Andrew Jackson was dependent on slave labor. The banks in New York and Boston and Philadelphia, run by the Quakers sometimes, were subsidizing through loans and all sorts of economic contributions to keeping the slaveholding population intact by protecting the slaveholders. Our economic system was based on that. When you look at the system right now, it's so important for us to always ask the question, and this is something that a lot of scholars have talked about called critical race theory, which is why Black History Month is so crucial. The uncomfortable questions and challenges that are facing us in our city, in our community today, on the front page of our college newspaper, is a major article about whether or not the Carbondale Police Department should have a substation in the Irma Hayes Center. I read that this morning, but yesterday one of my students sent me a petition asking me to put it out in my class so that they could say, no, we should never have that. But Monday night, as Dr. Flowers knows, we had a Human Relations Commission meeting in which we discussed how members of the community asked the police department to consider that, and how we had 2 young men who were going to be involved in trauma interventions from children from the ages of 0 to 18, and they were going to be working out of that place if the thing worked out right. What an incredible value. So I will talk to my student about that. But my problem right now is, this is what I'm talking about. If we don't go back down deep and realize that what we think is an easy answer because that's what we learned, we are not only missing the boat, but we're punching holes in the bottom of the boat. We will never get to where we want to go until we understand that when people say, well, you can't use the values of today to go back and look at the past. No, but you can look at the values of the past. And that's something we don't do very well in American education. We really don't study the past by its own values. Well, yeah, but slaveholding, well, wait. Thomas Jefferson said that he had nightmares considering the fact that the enslaved people would one day rise up and slay all of their white oppressors. He says that. Those are the values of the past. But there was a man in Boston, Massachusetts, who wrote a book called David Walker's Appeal. And he took Thomas Jefferson's writings and wrote a critique of them for why America would be doomed if it didn't deal with the issues of racial justice and freedom in 1829. I don't need to say, well, let's take our contemporary issues and go back and study the past. What we need to find out is that there were all these voices and people's lives that were challenging those values of the past, and we never are exposed to them. That's what I mean about who defines the terms. But here's I was always cranky, but now I'm a senior citizen, so now I'm a cranky old man. That's one of the benefits of getting old. I don't even have to justify it. I just is. Last night on television, Ibram Kendi, who has written a book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, was talking about his brand new book called 400 Souls, in honor of, or in response to, or following out of the 1619 Project that the New York Times won all sorts of prizes for, talking about the 400th, commemorating the 400th anniversary of slavery in the United States, the 1619 Project. It's no surprise to the members of the Rotary Club that I am Catholic. It might be a surprise to the bishop and the pope, but nevertheless, I am Catholic. Okay, the 1619 Project is bogus history, but it fits into the dominant narrative. The white male Protestant landowner tells the story of America. But I was in a Catholic grade school in East St. Louis, 8 grades, 4 nuns, 4 classrooms. And we knew about St. Augustine, Florida. Oh, yes. That was founded in the 1500s, and they have the records of the enslaved Africans. But we also know that De Soto, the great conquistador, came through from Florida all the way over to Mexico with enslaved Africans. That's in 1539. He had at least, and another one of the conquistadors had about 50 African slaves in his expedition. By 1580, the Spanish settlers in Florida were importing African enslaved people. That's before 1619. Florida, the last time I checked, from somebody who's talking about it, is the state of the Union. So how do we get 1619 as the beginning of slavery? Who tells the story? And the people who are being talked about don't often have a chance to say, but excuse me, I have something to say. Well, okay, that's your opinion. So this notion of alternate facts that we're hearing about in the political world today didn't start in the last 5 or 6 years. It started way back when Thomas Jefferson wrote a Declaration of Independence, and when his neighbors, like Monroe and Madison, wrote the Constitution. We've always had alternative facts. And Black History Month is the greatest, most glorious opportunity for us to formally, in a ritualized way, sit down and ask, Are there other facts that we have just walked past, ignoring them completely, or had a deaf ear to? Well, if that's the case, we need to slow down and remember this. Just as we carry our family genes with us, we carry our culture's history with us. It's not a waste of time to go back and hear the voices that have been muffled, because they may be able to tell us how to get out of the trouble we're in today. I tell my students that there are three themes to Black history, Black culture: resistance, persistence, transcendence. I want to tell people, yes, the horrors and atrocities that were inflicted upon children in slavery. But I also want to tell them how they grew up, became free, became Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman. I want them to know that the spirit that they had is also the spirit of Fannie Lou Hamer and Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King and John Lewis. And I want to tell them that if they know how those members of their cultural family survived it all and persisted until the point where they could move themselves up and say, I know I'm a child of God, not what you just called me, not how you just treated me. If I can say that, look at how they did it, because it's family history. Now, my last thing about this is, about 1991, I think it was, I was asked to substitute for a friend of mine who had died suddenly at the Los Angeles Catholic Educational Conference. There were about 6,000 people at the Anaheim Center, and I was preaching at it. And I started off my sermon with the bishop sitting behind me. It was a wonderful moment, and the largest crowd I've ever preached to, and haven't been invited back since, but that's neither here nor there. I started off my sermon by saying, I want to ask everybody in this room, there were thousands of people there. I want to ask everybody in this room, if you know you are descended from slaves, would you please raise your hand? A whole bunch of hands went up. And then I said, now, if there's anybody here who has the courage and the comfort to be able to say that you know you were descended from slave owners, would you raise your hands? Some hands went up. And I said, wait a minute, people. Some of y'all should have had your hands up both times. I know how that works. That's the problem we have. We have had a culture based on us versus them. When, as a matter of fact, maybe this is the one thing Ancestry.com don't want us to do, is to find out there ain't no them. There's only us. That's my family's personal history on both sides of the family. I told my students in my slave narratives class last night that my great-grandfather, Henry Rollins, showed up in the United States Census as a white Irish immigrant back around 1850. He moves to Missouri. He winds up having about, 2 children by a slave woman. And then he decides to get married to her and the next 4 children. But at that point, the census records him as colored. This man shifted his racial identity in the government's papers to be the legitimate legal father of his children. Wouldn't that be an incredible way for us to discover how related we all are to each other? And on my mother's side of the family, I was already teaching here at SIU before I found out who my mother's father was. She had a magazine from a company, and it was their annual magazine, for the stockholders and all. And she asked me one day, she said, did I ever tell you who my daddy was? I said, yeah, you told me, Stephen Yarborough. She said, that wasn't my daddy. And I'm going, whoa. Excuse me. You always pointed that picture and said that. No, that was your grandmama's boyfriend. Go out on the front porch and bring me that magazine in that cabinet. I did. And I recognized it because it used to be at my grandmother's house in her sewing room. And she said, here, that man is my daddy. puffy-faced, middle-aged white man who was the treasurer of the Bemis Bag Company, which was headquartered in Bemis, Tennessee, which also had a factory in St. Louis. She said, "That's my daddy." I got a genealogist working for our anthropology department to trace that back. 13-year-old young white boy reaching puberty rapes a 16-year-old Black girl. What's Black History Month? It's about discovering that our family stories are much more extensive and much more hopeful than we thought they were if we only stopped being afraid of what we might learn. And that's about all I need to say now, because I know my time is up for this presentation.
Father Brown, I just want to say thank you before we open it up to questions. It's insightful to hear some of that history and your comments about there is truly no us versus them. We are all us. I think is a message that a lot of people need to hear right now. So I thank you for sharing that and for sharing it with the young people, the college students that you work with every day. So
thank you.
With that, I'll open it up to questions. I'm sure there are some for Father Brown. The floor is open, everybody.
I have a question. Has the attitudes of our students that you're in college changed over the last 10 years in regard to their knowledge about Black history? And I guess my second question, do you see way down the future where someday it may not be necessary to have a Black History Month because understanding will be common enough that it doesn't have to be singled out? It'll be just part of our history.
I will always hope for that. And I know that if you do this correctly, you teach an American history class. In our university, like most of them, you have a 2-semester sequence. What I'm talking about and what you just asked a question about, it would have to be almost a 4-semester sequence to teach American history. Because when you talk about a city set on a hill, or the new Eden, the new Adam, I've always asked the question, you can call America the new Eden for the pilgrims who came over here, and that's what they called it. But there are all these people who are already there in Eden. When you understand that Squanto, the Indian that we were always told helped the pilgrims with their first harvest and Thanksgiving, that he had been enslaved by those pilgrims and shipped to England for 10 years. And when he was finally able to negotiate his freedom and come back, his entire village had been wiped out by disease. We need to go back and see that story as another survivor of traumatic stress. And how did he manage? Now, he wouldn't have been able to say, you all brought this disease, though we now know that they did. But in the devastation of being enslaved by a group of people, coming back to find his entire village destroyed, his whole family gone, he decides to work with the people who are there. That's got to be part of what we teach. So you've got all the different ways that America has been shaped by more and more cultures than we ever want to admit. And how can people today be anti-immigration and at the same time stand up and rejoice in the fact that their families were immigrants? It just doesn't make any sense to me. But the way we are taught history, we don't get that. So yes, I agree. It should be American history. And that means a 4-semester sequence. I ain't got a problem with that. But to answer your other question, students have always been at the forefront of social change in this country. And I always point out to my students that the majority of the African enslaved people were between the ages of 7 and 20. People that look like many of us on this chat would not have been picked up. In fact, in the days of slavery, people who look like a lot of us in this age group were being put on buckboards and brought into the cities and dumped there because they were too old to be of any economic value. So you have a whole problem of homeless Black people in places like Louisville, Kentucky. One of the great late works of Sojourner Truth was to work with those homeless people. Now, I need to know all of that because all of those issues are playing out today. All of them are. And I just appreciate the fact that the students, the young people, have always been at the forefront of social change. And our young people had to go through and understand and meet each other in ways that their parents and grandparents never had to do. The problem we have at SIU is that we have a number of advisors who tell those students, you don't want to take those classes. They're not going to do you any good. And you're only going to be upset because they're just going to pick on you if you're not Black. Those are quotes.
Unfortunate.
I know, but we don't give up. Yes, sir.
You've got a question, Jerry?
I have a comment, and that is that I've been looking for where we could find these facts, and I got turned on to a book which I've put in the chat called The People's History of the United States. And that one has just been awesome. I'm a third of the way through. It went through the colonists, the slavery, women, Indians, and now I'm up to the labor riots in the 60s. It has just been a mind-blowing experience and it's all well documented. This is not somebody's opinion. Every paragraph, it's heavy reading because every paragraph is referenced by where it came from. So
Howard Zinn is one of the greatest historians on this planet. That book, it changes everybody. I'm so glad you mentioned that. That book is just, as soon as you said that, the title of it, I went, oh yeah. Okay, exactly. It's a beautiful book and a great introduction. Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay.
Father, can you get a community listener's permit to sit in on your classes?
Well, you have to go through a security check with me first. No, no, I just did Monday the funeral for Suzanne McCann, who was one of the community listeners. In the spring of 2018, I had to substitute in an emergency and teach the Black History class second semester. That young man, the nephew of the basketball, Kavian Pippin, he was in that class. I had 3 or 4 kids from the mortuary science class and some children of some of the faculty. And Suzanne McCann was sitting in that second row in the auditorium of the museum, and she owned that class. I have, there's a married couple, both retired now, over in Carterville, who've taken at least 3 of my classes. In the paper today, what's the name of it? That's Scott Martin, Racial Unity Group. I think Scott must have taken 3 of my classes while he was here in town. So yes, the answer, Dr. Flowers, is I'm always, because the students need to see people from the community who are interested in stuff like this. It makes the class so much more fun. I'm glad you asked me that. Oh, yes.
All right. I know that it's 1 o'clock and there are some folks who have other engagements today. So I have one final question for you, Father Brown. And I guess I'm okay if people have further questions, or if you've got some time, I'd be happy to allow more Q&A, but I want to make sure we allow people time to go if they do. But my question is, and it's in relation to the world that we're in today in today's society. As a religious leader, how do you approach members, or how do you recommend approaching people who use religion for division purposes instead of for uniting?
Well, those people who've had to sit through those sermons that were mentioned at the very beginning know perfectly well that I happen to know how to read scripture, not for political purposes and not for economic purposes, but to actually say, now, what does this passage really mean? And all of Christianity ought to be based on the last few chapters of Matthew's gospel, especially where he says, whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me. But that's also the beginning of Luke's gospel, where Jesus comes out of the desert having been tempted and wrestling with the demonic forces that are splitting him up inside. And he comes out reconciled to himself and says, I'm here to fulfill scripture, to announce good news to the poor, a release to the captives, etc., etc. The entire scripture is about Jesus was not born at home. Within 2 years, he had to become a desperate immigrant into a foreign land so that his life could be saved. We've got this story so mixed up that somehow God favors some over others. And you had great theologians in the 16, 17, 18, 1900s, and all the way into the 2000s, writing a version of Christianity that doesn't square with the text itself. God is not the judge. God is the redeeming healer. But you better bring your act in honesty before the altar. And that's what I have been preaching now. This is the last part I'm going to say about this. I was raised in a very strange home. I know you all find that hard to believe. My father's side of the family were Methodists. My mother's side of the family were Baptists. They converted to Catholicism in spite of a racist priest in Mounds, Illinois, who told them, if I bring you into the Catholic Church, my parishioners will run me out of town. So they went back to East St. Louis, and along with about 8 or 9 other Black families, became Catholic in the 1930s. We had one of the most racist bishops in the history of the Catholic Church in America in Belleville, Bishop Zura West. My father told me in 1972, when my nephew was being confirmed and the bishop insulted me in front of the entire church because he thought I was a Baptist instead of a Catholic, even though I was wearing the Roman collar and everything. He couldn't see a Black person being a priest. And he said that in front of everybody. My father said to me, if that man's at your ordination, I won't be there. You work it out. So I was raised in a family that taught me, I will judge you by your actions, not by your credentials. Not what they say, but what they do. If the bishop is a racist, he won't be at my house. He will not be in my church. He will not be in my consciousness. And so I went and found the only Black Catholic bishop in the country in New Orleans. He came up there. We had a great 3-day party, basically. And my father was there for all of it. My point is this. I was raised in a house where my family had to fight racial oppression within the church. I had to desegregate a school system with my sister, a Catholic school system. In 1956, we were the only 2 Black kids in the entire city's Catholic school network. I was the only Black person in my high school, and I say Black person meaning janitor, cooks, whatever. Only Black person for 3 out of my 4 years in high school. There was another Black person there one year because I didn't play basketball. They went and got Jerry Hyde to come in and help them get a winning season. He graduated, and that was it. I have always had to face racism. So it's not a challenge for me to get up and say, this is the Jesus I hold on to. But it's also the Jesus all of these great figures in Black history held on to. I just preach what I've been taught. And so do other people. I'm sorry I went on too long on that one, but that's
okay. I don't know if other folks have questions or if you've got time, but we'll wrap up our meeting here. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I'll go back to sharing my screen. So once again, want to thank Father Brown for joining us today. Next week, our speaker is Mrs. Kathleen Lively of Mantricon, and then we have Ms. Ronnie LaForge of the City of Carbondale, and on the 24th of this month, Tom Davenport of the Carbondale Chamber of Commerce. So please tune in next week, same time, same place, and we'll have some additional community interaction. Now it is time for the four-way test. Our President-elect, Jerry Malumbi, would you please lead us in the four-way test?
This is the four-way test, but in the context of what we've heard today, think of what this country would be like if this had been applied universally from the beginning. The four-way test of what we think, say, or do. 1.
Is it the truth?
2.
Is it fair to
all concerned?
3.
Build goodwill and
Build
better-
goodwill and better friendships.
And 4.
will it be
Will it be
beneficial
beneficial to all
concerned?
concerned?
I want to thank everybody again for joining us with Rotary today. And we will see all of you again next week at noon. So be sure to check out our website, Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and our YouTube channel. This will be posted on YouTube later today or tomorrow at some point. So thank you all for joining us.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.